Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
Now I'm G.
He always has to pause there because sometimes he struggles with remembering who he is. But that's G. We're excited about. What are we down to now? About is it 19 days, something like that?
I think it's less than that.
18 days, something like that, till election day. But as we always like to say, elections are already going, voting's already happening. There's folks doing early voting in a lot of states, mail-in, absentee ballots. And so we're going to talk, we've got a special guest today we're going to introduce in a little bit, but G-Man, you feeling all right today?
I am, yeah, and it's actually 16 days until November 3rd.
Wow, it's I feel like a kid on Christmas Eve, hoping that my stocking is not orange.
Right, well, if you can believe the polls, although I just saw Ralph Reed talking about how you can't believe any of the polling this year because it's all a hokum science, I think is what he called it.
Yeah. Well, and like last time, our polls have to be translated from Russian, so we'll have to.
Right, absolutely.
We'll have to do that. So, we're gonna. We had an interesting night last Thursday night because we had dueling town hall meetings.
Right.
Where President Trump refused the virtual town hall due to COVID requirements, and so had a Joe Biden town hall on ABC, and then NBC stepped up and, to the ire of many, gave Trump a platform at the same time as the ABC.
Right. Although from what I didn't get to see those, I had a conflict, but from what I read, Savannah Guthrie kind of batted him around pretty good.
Well, I think it goes back to the old saying about Harry Truman, give him hell.
Right.
I think she just told the truth and he thought it was hell.
Right.
So anytime Trump gets a hard question, he thinks it's somebody's betting him around. So,
right.
But I watched all of the Biden town hall, and then I watched a recap and some clips of the Trump town hall, and I think it shows the stark differences between the two styles,
right.
the command of the issues, and then even just the empathy and the personalities. So,
right. Well, that's I believe Biden won the ratings war in that, and that's a good segue to bring in our guest. So our guest today is TK from Dallas. He's a Biden supporter, and he's going to tell us today what it is about Joe Biden that has him excited to cast his vote for the former VP. Welcome, TK.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sure. So I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
So tell us a little bit about why you like Joe Biden this year.
Well, I was listening to your intro there, and I'd have to say it's pretty much that's true. I mean, you watch the two of them, and the contrast couldn't be more stark. You've got pretty much, I hate to say this, raving lunatic on one side. And then you've got a calm, collected, statesman-like candidate on the other side. And I think from what I've seen, I didn't see all of the Biden town hall, and I saw, like he was saying, I saw some clips from the Trump town hall. But I mean, that alone by itself, is pretty easy to decipher who maybe that we need to have going forward.
Right. What do you say to people that that seems to be there's two different camps. One that want to see us return to what's normal. I've heard that phrase bandied about, and then the Trump supporters elected him to drain the swamp. So how do you envision a Biden administration going forward? Do you see it being a kind of a more radical progressive agenda, as some have suggested? There's rumors that he cut a deal with Bernie to get Bernie out of the race. Just what do you think about a Biden administration?
Well, I think you're right. I think that's what basically happened in the primary finally is that as it finally shook out, Biden was a little slow to get started. Obviously, it seemed like, Bernie was, pretty much on fire and progressives. Our political system has a tendency to lean toward the wings, if you will, early on, because obviously people that are interested in politics 2 years before the election tend to be, a little either further right or further left, either way.
Right.
So that's why we get these pendulum swing type things. But as the primary kind of started to, go on, Barney started to lose a little support because, a lot of Americans are still not comfortable with, the radical progressive, if you will, left on
Right.
some issues. I mean, I think we hear all the time about the center right America, but basically the polls almost always show when they take the politics out of it, it's more like center left America.
Right.
Right.
Most Americans are pretty pro on a lot of social issues, and so the safety nets and things like that, Social Security, Medicare, obviously the Obamacare, if you will, the ACA, pre-existing conditions, and all those kind of things. Most Americans are really more center left than they are center right, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that has a tendency to work in our politics the same way as you get closer to the election or closer to the primary election or even closer to the general. I think the majority of people are in that 60% that are in the center versus the 20% on either wing. And so I think as we went along in the primaries, especially starting in South Carolina, obviously, because Bernie had struggled a little bit with the African-American vote. And, Biden has been there a long time with the Senate, obviously for many, many years. And then as 8 years as Obama's vice president. So he is well known in the African-American community. And so South Carolina kind of was his firewall all along. And once they got to those dates and got into the South a little bit, Biden picked up steam and actually picked up so much steam that he basically steamrolled
Right.
all the other candidates. And so I do think that a lot of people are looking for a normal, let's go back to some sense of normalcy instead of this absolute 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365-day a year chaos.
Right.
Just in the last, I mean, like you say, we didn't come on here today to talk about Trump, but just in the last few days, I mean, the things that have come out just in 2 or 3 days and I understand that he's a little desperate at the end of the campaign and all the polls are showing him, no matter what Ralph Reed says. Polling's pretty good. We hear a lot about last time how the polling was off. Well, if you look back, the polling wasn't that far off last time.
No, it really wasn't.
Okay.
Right.
There's a lot of talk about the polling being off, but there was 78,000 votes in about 4 states. And most of those states in the early polling and the exit polling both showed Hillary being in front, but even if it was just a point or two. So, you can take that for what it's worth as to, Russian involvement, hacking, all these other things that happened. Comey at the end of the day, a week before the election, talking about Hillary being investigated. A lot of things happened there at the last minute that created kind of a perfect storm of events. I think Hillary's camp was a little overconfident. Obviously, they were, they made some mistakes at the end. They're not going to Michigan and not going to Wisconsin and some of those places they thought were locked up. Obviously, it turned out not to be. But the polling was not that far off last time.
Yeah.
And this time the polling shows Biden with a way bigger lead than Hillary had in those swing states. Most of them at least double what she had last time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't buy into this, the fact that the polls are always off. Okay. There may be some Trump voters out there that are quote unquote embarrassed to admit to a pollster who they're voting for. But basically, I think the polls are all pretty accurate, and it's been shown for many, many years. In 2018, again, the polls were very accurate again.
Right.
So I think there was a perfect storm of events back there in 2016 with Hillary had a pretty high unlikability factor, which I've never really understood completely. But Joe Biden pretty much has a likability factor, if you will.
Right.
Whether it's Uncle Joe or whatever, he's been around a long time. I think being the vice president for Obama for 8 years, I think is a huge deal going forward. And just in the, things with the pandemic, foreign affairs, all these things that he's been there, done that. Okay.
Right.
That the old adage about when the phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, what's he going to do? Well, he's not going to panic. Okay.
Right.
He's been there. He's done that. He's run a campaign against a pandemic. Okay. So he's been there. He actually brought was a point man basically on bringing us out of the Great Recession, if you will, after the Bush years of back in 2008. And so all the things that we have facing us, I think, Joe has the experience and has the wherewithal to basically tackle any of those and all of those, and has already in the past. And so I think it's that part of it, as far as that goes, is a no-brainer. If I know there's a lot of people that have this.
I think you're dead on about the polling, because when you think about 2016, Hillary, she won the popular vote by about 3 points, which
Exactly.
is what we said. And so, the big difference to me this time is that Biden is above 50% in most of these states.
Right.
And when you get above 50,
and that's a big deal as far as polling is concerned. It is a big deal to crack that 50% mark. And the thing that still has to worry Democrats in the back of their mind is the Electoral College. I mean,
right.
The Electoral College there's no question about it. It's biased toward the Republicans. It's biased toward rural states. They get way more credit than they deserve in the Electoral College. And so that is always going to be an issue for the Democrats. Like you said, Hillary won the popular vote by 3 million. Actually, going back to 2000, Gore won the popular vote by 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had two presidents since 2000. We've had two presidents basically appointed
Right.
by the Electoral College,
Right.
2 out of the last 3. And so I've seen comments made by pretty sharp folks that say, Biden actually needs to win by about 5 million to 6 million votes to guarantee the Electoral College.
Right.
And the same thing happened in the House, even in 2018, when the quote unquote blue wave hit the House of Representatives. The Democrats got like 13% higher voter turnout, but
Right.
in the polls. And still, at that point, the numbers would say they would have won the House by having a majority in the House by, say, 67, I think, and they ended up with 32.
Yeah.
So
That was an interesting.
The popular vote is diluted, no question.
Yeah, that was an interesting point during the last the Supreme Court sham going on right now. Is that they were talking about, Moscow Mitch was talking about how the voters had elected Republican majority and in number of seats they had, but to your point about the way the Electoral College works, when you look at the actual number of votes that were cast for senators, more people voted for Democrats than voted for Republicans.
Yeah,
And
the Senate's the same situation. Doesn't get talked about quite as much as the Electoral College because it doesn't get focused on quite as much. But you talk about something being outdated. The fact that Dakotas, if you will, have 4 senators with what a population of 1.6 million.
Yeah.
And
Right.
California's got 2 senators, a population of 40 million.
Yeah.
It's there's no question it's outdated.
One of my friends from Wyoming, he used to always say, I think Wyoming, the population is something like 850,000 people or something in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah, I think
He
it's
used to
less,
always,
I think it's
he
less.
used to always, it's 3 people per square mile, something
Right.
like that. And so he said, if there's been a murder and you haven't been murdered and you're not the sheriff, there's a good likelihood you're the suspect.
Yeah, there you go. It's exactly right.
But
Well,
they
you know
shouldn't
that-
have, them having 2 senators versus California or Texas or New York for that matter. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
hey,
and
one of the-
you
one of
see
the-
a lot of times you see these maps, they show the red and blue as far as where they voted and stuff. And there's a lot of red on the map and all out there. And to me, my question always is, so what you want to do is you want to have an election based on square miles versus popular vote.
yeah.
In other words, basically they win the mountain goat vote.
Right.
Right.
Okay, if you win the mountain goat vote, you can be installed as the president. And I think, even Trumpers, I think there was a study just recently done, and like 78%, which would have to include some of those Trumpers, believe that the person that gets the most votes should be the president,
Right.
or any election, as far as that's concerned. So I don't think that we fundamentally have a difference of opinion at that. But like I said, between gerrymandering, voter suppression, and all these other things that have been done on the right, and now they're almost proud of it. I mean, they closed drop boxes, they attack the mail, they attack early voting. I mean, they've done everything they can do to try to suppress the vote and make it harder to vote. And as you've seen already, just in the early voting, look at the lines.
Yeah.
Georgia, those guys, kudos to the people in Georgia. They stood in line 12 hours to vote.
Right.
That's ridiculous in the United States of America. Okay?
Right. Yeah. And if
We've
people
gone
want
to war for other people to vote
yeah,
overseas.
people want to, yeah,
and
people
we
want
can't get them. We can't get them through the line in an hour or less here in
Right.
America.
yeah, it's funny because people want to, I've seen some people online try to applaud, I'm all for the people, for them, their dedication. But to me, it's an embarrassment that they have to wait that long.
Oh, no question, no question.
Yeah.
I was pretty fortunate here. We voted the first day in early voting on Tuesday here in Texas, and I thought there might be a line out early before people went to work, so I kind of waited on purpose till about 10:30. Luckily, there was a line outside the Skyline Library over here where we vote in East Dallas, and I've voted over here for a long time, and I've never seen a line out down the sidewalk, but went pretty quick, and they're very, very efficient. I give the people over there credit. It took us about 20-25 minutes to vote total, and so maybe it had something to do with timing it right, but I know there's a lot of places. It's I've seen at least 10 or 15 people post. It took 2.5 hours, 2 hours,
Right.
whatever, but I was happy to wait. That kind of thing.
Well,
But
if
the thing
the,
is, like you said, they shouldn't have to wait like that. I mean, that to me is in the United States of America, we make it so hard for people to vote. And like I said, we've spent years and millions and trillions and fighting wars overseas to supposedly help people have
Yeah.
democracy and let them vote. And we can't even, we do
Right.
everything we can to make it harder to vote here at home.
Yeah,
well,
we did.
one of the, go ahead, Chris.
I was just to say, we did a podcast a while back. We had a professor on it that's pretty big expert in the Electoral College, and we were talking about the fact that it's funny that we go to other countries and we lecture them on democracy, we lecture them on how to vote, and then we never recommend the way that we vote to other countries.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah.
Exactly. D-Man, I think you had a question. You want to jump in?
Oh, I was just going to say, talking about mail-in voting and all of the, the controversy that's been around that. I've been in Colorado since 2005, and we've had mail-in voting the whole time I've been here, and it works great. You register you register to vote, you click your party affiliation. Now we just a couple years back we changed the law so that you can vote in either primary. You just have to declare, so 30 days before, you have to declare which primary you want to vote in. And from what I've read, we don't have a lot of people switching back and forth. I've never switched back and forth. And then about 3 weeks before the election, you get your ballot in the mail. About 2 weeks before that, you get a book that the state puts out where they actually take each ballot measure and put together a pro and con, and they tell you who the groups are that are putting the pro and the con in there so that you can read and you can determine for yourself how you want to vote. Then when your ballot comes, you have the option of dropping it off, which we have way more drop-off locations than you guys do in Texas.
Oh yeah, especially now.
Right. Or you can mail it, or that we actually have in-person voting, which I think starts about 3 days before election day, and then goes through 7 o'clock on November 3rd. So we have a variety of ways to cast your vote. We make it easy. And actually, the studies show that more Republicans return their ballots via the drop box or the mail than Democrats do.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I just read something about that the other day, that this this bashing of mail-in balloting and stuff is really not really smart on the Republicans' part, because in the past, the tendency's been that the Republicans actually will have a 2 or 3% margin in mail-in balloting over the Democrats. So,
Right.
You're in a situation where it's like a lot of things that come out of the Trump side, is it just doesn't make really sense to
Right.
bash mail-in voting when when the studies show that it's a positive for Republicans.
Right.
I don't get it, but like you said, I think there's 27 or 28 states now that have some form of mail balloting.
Right.
I think Colorado is one of the ones that's been pretty progressive about that, but there's 7 or 8 states, I think, that's all mail-in balloting. They don't even have in-person voting.
Right.
Like Oregon, Washington, maybe Hawaii, some of those out west. Most of them were out west. I looked at the list the other day.
Right.
7 or 8 of them that don't even have in-person voting at all. So, the military, since right after the Civil War, or basically back to the Civil War, has been voting by mail-in ballot for a couple hundred years now, almost 150 years. So it's just I think it goes back to what he said a minute ago. They're against anything that they think doesn't benefit them.
Right.
And the sad thing about that kind of voting, the democracy, is that, if you've got to stop people from voting, your ideas must not be very damn good.
Right.
Is there a Biden policy or campaign promise that you're especially looking forward to getting implemented if he gets elected?
Well, I think on the Democratic side, and seems to, the people are really have turned the corner dramatically as far as the ACA is concerned, and healthcare is by far, it's like 78% the biggest concern for people. So as it gets closer to the election, it's kind of getting back down to brass tacks again. It's almost always healthcare, tax policy, foreign affairs take a back seat most of the time to that kind of thing. And I think the Obamacare, or the ACA, if you will, the pre-existing conditions is something that Biden will fight for. He actually fought for, obviously, originally 7 years, 12 years ago now, when the ACA was passed. So I guess it was 2009 when it finally passed. But like I said, I think healthcare is a huge issue. Joe's been pretty vocal about he's not necessarily for Medicare for all, but Medicare for most, with maybe a public option to make to hold the insurance companies' feet to the fire, make them compete in an open market rather than the way they've done in the past. And so I think the healthcare issue is a big issue. Obviously, the Supreme Court justice nomination process right now is the reason that's such a big deal to Democrats, and we feel like it's been forced through when Merrick Garland stood there for 300 days and couldn't get a hearing.
Right.
3 weeks that they pushed this one through. But November 10th, it's going to come before the Supreme Court on November 10th. You've got 36 or 7, I think, state attorney generals, 35 of them, I think, of which are Republicans, have signed on to that lawsuit to try to make Obamacare or ACA unconstitutional, which obviously includes the pre-existing conditions. And they stand up and running for office and say they're all for protecting pre-existing conditions when they got a lawsuit that says just the opposite, which is fixing to come up, like I say, a week after the election.
Well, if you follow that case, when it came up the first time, it was upheld 5-4. John Roberts cast the deciding vote.
Yep.
The only reason he did is because the mandate that you purchase insurance complied with the Commerce Clause.
Yes.
And now the Republicans have eliminated that. So I don't see how anybody that, follows court cases at all could see how this is going to stand. I mean,
well, like you said, almost everything in the law ends up being precedent.
Right.
And precedent doesn't look very good, and it sure doesn't look very good when you got a court that's 6-3.
Yeah.
Toward
Yeah,
the
and I
rally.
think the big issue is on healthcare is the fact that Republicans have had 4 years to come up with a plan, and they don't have any kind of plan, as you said, in place to cover pre-existing
Yeah.
conditions when
Well,
that happens. And now
even-
we've got
Even
almost
pre-Trump,
yeah,
even
almost
pre-Trump, I think it was, they tried to repeal Obamacare like 75 times
Yep.
when they had control of the House. And but so they've tried to repeal it 75 times. They filed these lawsuits. It's held up till now, but as G was saying, it's precedent doesn't look good, and the balance of that court doesn't look good for it on November 10th for
Right.
sure. But I think healthcare is one of the issues that the Democrats always have a little bit of a leg up on, because basically, I think it was Alan Grayson a few years ago, a congressman from Florida, who said that Republicans' plan was don't get sick,
Right.
and if you get sick, die quickly. So
Right.
they had a 2-point plan, and they basically, like you were saying, they haven't really moved off that too much.
Right.
And then, and like I said, they've got a court case now trying to knock about what is going to be like 27 million people will get knocked off of
Yeah.
their insurance if that ACA is struck down. And it's coming on us pretty quick. Like I said, a week after the election,
Yeah.
November 10th, that case comes before the Supreme Court.
Well, and if the Democrats, if it is a blue wave, like a lot of the polls are showing, then I think that almost gives them a catapult for the next 2 years and for 2022, and to say these are the people that voted to get rid of your health care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, the campaign will begin already, and they can put through. There's some fixes they can put through to and I think that opens the door for Medicare for all at that point where
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and like I say, I think the argument against Medicare for all is pretty specious. That Medicare works so spectacularly for this country with a 2 to 3% administration cost versus 20% or more sometimes in insurance companies with their advertising and their executive pay. So fiscally, Medicare for all is kind of hard to argue against. Fairness wise, Medicare for all is hard to argue with. And we're supposed to be a country that's kind of based and built on fairness and justice. So it's hard to argue a case against that. But they try, and basically, they tend to say basically you can only deserve the health care that you can afford.
Right.
They can afford a lot more health care, as we just saw what a million and a half would have been spent on Trump in 3 days in the hospital there in Walter Reed.
Right. And that would have
Most of us don't have access to that type of health care.
Yeah, and that million would have just been for his fast food bill. Yeah. It's interesting that there's a lot of folks who are against socialism for other people.
Yeah.
But they're for socialism for themselves. And they're for when they get benefits, it's like if they're, I know people where their kids got Pell Grants that helped them get through college and got, government financed student loans. And I'm for all those things to help kids better their future. But then you talk to the parents and they'll say, yeah, we don't believe in welfare. We don't think people ought to be, people should, they shouldn't get handouts. And I'm going, okay, well, it didn't seem to affect you much when you were accepted.
That's right. It's you got people like Paul Ryan, who's no longer in Washington, but he went through college, as you said. His father had died, and he had a Social Security had sent him to college. Ben Carson, that's another perfect example. Grew up in the projects, got every welfare or safety net possible. And it's funny, I call them pull the ladder up behind you, Republicans.
Right. Yeah.
Basically they take advantage of everything, but they don't want anybody else to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
We've got the governor here in Texas. He's as big a hypocrite as anybody that's ever walked, and play on words. I don't mean that. But they're all personal responsibility until he's jogging in a thunderstorm and a tree falls on him. He sues the homeowner, the tree company, everybody else for, I think he ended up with $14 million so far, and it's gonna, they project it to be about 19 million by the time, he dies, whatever. Well, the whole time he's been in elected office, he's fought for tort reform, and the person that had this very same accident that he had, if it happened to them today, their money would be capped at 250,000.
Right.
So that's my point, I guess, is that the pull the ladder up behind them, they have no problem with that. Like you said, they'll take advantage of every opportunity, but they don't want anybody else to have that.
Right.
TK, do you look for Biden to pack the court?
I don't know why they won't just answer that question. To me, it's given. There's a pretty simple answer to it, and it's given way too much fodder to the right and Fox and all of them. I don't know why they don't just say, look, I really don't want to get into hypotheticals about what I might do in opposition to what you've already done. Okay.
Right.
You've already, as we're fixing to find out in a few days, you're going to pack the court, in less than 4 years with 3 justices that are basically would never be, none of the 3 would have ever been nominated, even much less confirmed in any close to a 50-50 Senate or whatever, because they're so far to the right. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and this lady Coney Barrett, now she's even further to the right. And those people would have never gotten through a confirmation process if it weren't for Mitch McConnell. Right. And so I think it'd be real easy to say, I really don't want to get into hypotheticals about what I might do based on what you've already done. But after the election, I'll be happy to look at, whatever I feel like is necessary at
Right.
that point to bring some normalcy to it. And because if I get elected, that's basically what the American people have said. They want normalcy. Right. And so the normalcy is not in the Supreme Court right now. They have almost made a mockery of the Supreme Court. And I think even a lot of people on the right would even have to, agree with that.
Right.
So I think it's really a simple answer. Is you're asking me to talk about packing the court. I'm not really for that, and I think Biden, he's not been as clear as he should have been, but he basically has said he's not for packing the court.
Right.
But he would look at whatever he needs to look at to make it, like I said before, America's built on fairness and justice, and the way it stands right now and the way it's fixing to go even further to the right, there's not fairness and justice there. So whatever we need to do to make the Supreme Court a little more fair and a little more just, they already rule about 78% of the time for corporate interests. So the average Joe's got about a 1 in 5 chance of ever winning a case at the Supreme Court anyway.
Right.
To make that even further to the right, I think is pretty easy to see that there's not much fairness and justice there.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. He should be a little bit more forceful. Joe shouldn't just say, "I'm not going to answer hypotheticals." We've got an election to win. We have to win the Senate for any changes to happen.
Right.
But at that point, we'll talk about reforms that need to take place, and it's really up to the Republicans, and it's up to what they do now. And the fact that they're jamming this Supreme Court justice through, the fact that they blocked Merrick Garland, and they're on record as saying Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn, John Thune, Ted Cruz. I'm naming all your favorites.
Yeah.
They're all on record saying that back in 2016, they said, if Hillary Clinton wins, we'll keep Scalia's seat open for 4 or 8 years if we have to. We will not fill it with a nominee for her. So I don't think their crocodile tears about fairness or about packing the courts or anything like that need to be even addressed because they've got no legs to stand on. Not to mention the fact that they've jammed through more federal bench opening than
no
Obama
question.
had in 8 years.
Those numbers are actually staggering. If you go back and look, they've snuck that around the American people. Most people have no idea.
Right.
I love, yeah, there's a quote where Trump said in his first year, he was talking about all the judges we've gotten through, which by the way, at least 50% of them have been rated as unfit to be judged.
Unqualified by the Bar
American Bar
Association. Yep,
Association.
exactly.
But
I think
Trump
the
said,
number's getting close to 300 that
yeah,
he's appointed.
and Trump
And these
said,
are- most of those are lifetime appointments.
yeah, and Trump said, I can't believe that Obama didn't left me all these openings and Obama didn't do a good job by filling these. He's leaving out the part that Mitch McConnell blocked those from being filled.
Yes,
So
exactly.
they want to talk about packing the courts. I mean, that it doesn't get any more close to
Yeah,
packing.
that's the irony is they're nothing if not projectionists for sure, because if they whatever they're accusing their opponent of, they've already been doing.
Exactly.
And the irony, this is really ironic about packing the court. The fact that they're asking this question every single debate, every single time they have anybody on. They asked Kamala about it. They beat her to death over it the other day, and they've obviously been, whacking Biden over the head with it. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, the irony is too thick. You can't cut it with a knife. I mean, they've been packing the court for 4 years, basically, and they're packing the Supreme Court again, and they're talking about that the Democrats are going to pack the court. It's just, it's pretty mind-boggling to me that the way that they've been able to turn that coin around. And like we said before, they're good on messaging. They stick to the messaging. And Trump's another, he's the alpha Republican as far as that goes, as far as just sticking on message. I mean, he just absolutely lies with no qualms about it. I saw him last night. We've turned the corner on COVID. 36 out of 50 states are seeing spikes, and not one state, not one. There's 13 or 14 that have stayed steady. Okay. Not gone down, but haven't gone up. But 36 out of 50, 72% have seen spikes. And then he's standing on the stump every single day saying we've turned the corner and we're past it. It's over. I don't think those 200, I think as of today, it's going to be like 223,000 that are dead. So like I said, I don't want to get too much into the COVID stuff, because there's no question. The statistics show that, 97-ish, 98% of Americans that get it are going to survive it. Okay. That doesn't mean that they should get it, and that don't mean that we should be happy that 200 some odd thousand are dead. As far as that goes, I mean, we probably wouldn't all go vote for lining up people, at a firing squad either. But that's basically what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the thing on COVID is most level-headed people nobody blames any politician for the fact that COVID's here, but it's been the terrible response.
Exactly.
And the fact that, to me, the fact that it's been politicized.
Yeah.
I mean, why is it if I wear a mask and I'm out on the street with my wife taking a walk, I'll get people sometimes that'll flip me off and give me the finger for wearing a mask.
Yep.
Go, okay, I'm wearing this just as much for other people as I'm wearing it for myself. You want to protect, it's basic. Joe said it the other night, it's basic decency to wear a mask. And that's where a president's words matter. That's where a president can bring people together and say, he could have, when G and I have talked about this before, when he gave his first Oval Office speech about COVID-19, at the time, Joe and Bernie were the last two Democrats still in there. I told G, man, if I was Trump, I would have looked at that as a political opportunity, and I would have had a speech where I had both those two join me in the Oval Office and say, this is bigger than politics. We're going to come together as a country. And most of the time, first of all, we need that as a message from a national standpoint, having a national strategy. But most of the time, the American people rally behind the president in a time of crisis because they want us to succeed, because the president's trying to bring us together. This guy doesn't recognize how to bring, I don't think he could put two pieces of bread on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich together. So I know he can't bring the American people.
Well, that University of Washington, they've done most of the studies about the deaths and the cases and stuff in the United States and how they project it to go and they say by February 1st, they're looking at 390,000 deaths.
Wow.
And the guy was on last night and he said that just a program to wear the mask, if the president would come out and say, wear your mask. Like what Chris Christie came back now and said, you know, I made a mistake. It was a mistake not to wear a mask. I should have worn a mask, you know. But the fact is, about 100,000 of those extra 180 that are coming up into February, about 100,000 of those could be saved just with the mask situation. And like I said, you got Chris Christie. He was there at that super spreader event at the Rose Garden for Amy Coney Barrett.
Right.
He was in debate prep with Trump. Never wore a mask any of that time. And he said he was lulled to sleep by the fact that he was told that they had all the protocols in place, which they didn't, obviously. And he spent a week in the hospital in ICU. And so, you know, he's I think as far as that goes, I've never been a big fan of Chris Christie, but I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that he come back and now and says, hey, you know, it was a mistake not to wear the mask. Right. So like you said, it just one little thing. If Trump wouldn't, you know, mock people for wearing masks, and just come out and say, look, you know, wear your mask if you go out, social distance as much as you can, and let's try to save a few Americans.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, from a public policy standpoint, it would have saved lives. But from a political standpoint,
oh my goodness, you're right. There's no question.
If he would have said to Joe Biden, we need to make a PSA where we're in the commercial together and encouraging everyone to wear masks. At that point, Biden can't say no.
Right.
Because early on, I'm talking about now he could, but early on he couldn't have said no, because then Trump could have said, well, I invited Vice President Biden to be in the commercial with me and he wouldn't do it.
Right.
So, but he doesn't recognize
it. There's no question he's totally mishandled it. And like you said, look, even the furthest left folks, even the lefties of the lefties, they're not blaming Trump for the virus.
Right.
They're blaming him for the response.
Right.
You know, we're 7 months into this thing now, and we're spiking again. And like I said, he knew in January. You know, Peter Navarro sent him a memo. There's no question about it. They've got copies of the memo. Peter Navarro, his advisor, sent him a memo at the end of January that as many as 500,000 people could die. So he knew early on. And then, you know, obviously you've got Bernstein's reporting and stuff that, you know, that Trump on tape admitting that he knew it was a lot more serious and didn't tell anybody. Right. So the total mishandling of it is the issue, not the fact that, you know, there was no doubt that we were eventually going to face something like this.
Yeah.
You know, we had the H1N1, we had the Ebola, we've had, you know, all these things. The H1N1, I think only 12,000 ended up dying, 12,500, give or take. And Joe was involved in that back with the Obama administration. And then the Ebola scare, if you remember that, you know, I think the one guy died, but here in Dallas, oddly enough, he had traveled from Africa. And so because of the fact that they had a pandemic plan in place, you know, they were able to not nip that in the bud, so to speak. And they offered it to Trump in 2016. Obama's people in the transition, you know, they offered the Trump people they had a 6-hour conference about a pandemic response before this coronavirus ever hit. But just the fact that we knew something like that was on the horizon and was probably coming. And basically, you know, you can read reports about it, and all the Trump people that were there, like, what are we doing here? We're not going to listen to anything that Obama people say anyway. We're not going to implement anything they tell us. We're just wasting our time here. But they were offered the playbook for that, and they turned it away.
Well, TK, we're getting close to wrapping up. I want to ask you real quick as we get close to this. What are you looking? Are there any indicators on election night that you're looking for as far as when returns start coming in, or maybe there's a certain state you kind of have your eye on?
Well, it's interesting that you know, we talked about this earlier about the Republicans were pretty good at politics. If you remember Karl Rove, they knew with Bush, they knew it was going to come down to Florida. They even almost knew what counties and precincts it was going to come down to. Right. And then 4 years later with Bush, the second time around, they knew it was going to come down to Ohio. Right. And so these politicos and polling and all the things we talked about earlier, these people are pretty sharp. Okay. And I think basically, all the polling is showing that Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, all those places, 3 out of the 4 at least places where Hillary dropped the ball, if you will, supposedly,
Right.
or the Russians helped out, or whatever you may think. I think you're going to look at a situation where Ohio's still going to be a linchpin. There's no chance of Trump winning if he doesn't win Ohio.
Right.
He very well may end up winning Florida, although Biden's up by a point or a point and a half. It's getting pretty tight in Florida. Georgia, oddly enough, is a little bit of a swing state right now. I fully expect that Trump will probably still carry that.
Right now in Ohio, it's Trump 47.1 to Biden 46.9.
Is it right? I knew they were dead, almost a dead heat.
Yeah.
Texas, I don't think is going to go blue this time, but I think we've made huge strides to make it more competitive. I think we're still a point or two away, at least, maybe 3 or 4. But I think Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are going to be bellwether for Biden. Those numbers have just dramatically shifted over what Hillary had and what Trump ended up with. So I think in that situation, North Carolina is another one. I knew in 2016, I was at the Dallas County Democrats at Union Station with a judge friend of mine I've known in politics for 40 years. And when one of those results started coming in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan came in, we just looked at each other both and said, "Hey, I'm out of here. It's going to be a bloodbath."
Right.
And it was unheard. Nobody really expected it, but once those returns came in, so you've got those states that are going to be pretty pivotal. If somehow Biden wins Florida, it's almost a death knell for Trump. If Biden wins Ohio, it definitely would be a death knell. I don't think there's much chance now Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or Michigan turning back to Trump. So it's probably going to be, Florida, Ohio, which oddly enough has kind of been what we've seen for maybe 20 years now.
Right. Well, Biden has a 4-point lead in Florida and North Carolina currently.
Yeah.
If you can believe the polls.
Yeah. Well, and I think Trump has not done himself much of a service by mocking this whole Corona deal, because a lot of those older folks in Florida are they're a little more worried and scared about their health than.
Well, and they take it serious because they haven't been able to see their grandkids. They haven't been able to go anywhere, and to almost be mocked. That's not good. And they're a reliable voter base. They're going to vote.
They will vote, and there's a lot. They're a lot more. I guess I'd call it 50-50 than 60-40.
Right.
In the past, they've pretty much been 60-40. So the Democrats have been trying to claw back from being behind like you said, a voter block that's real reliable. I think this time they're way closer to 50-50, and maybe even shading a little over 50% for Biden. So, and like I say, you said it, the response is the issue, the mocking of it when they haven't been able to see family members and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate you being on here today. And
hey, like I told you guys, I'm humbled to be asked, and as you know, I have a lot of opinions. Most of them are a little left of center. Some of them are way left of center, but
well, we all know what they say about opinions, right?
That's right.
Right. But we appreciate you being on here. Like we always end every podcast by reminding everybody there's voter deadlines coming up in a lot of states where you can still get registered in some states. So if you haven't registered, please get out and register. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Everybody needs to participate. It's our way of doing our part. And so everybody has a role to play, and make a plan. If you can vote early, vote early. If you want to vote in the mail or vote absentee, get registered for that. Or if you're going to vote in person that day, get a plan in place, because it's important that every vote gets counted.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Texans, I will say this, you've got early voting's already started. It runs through, I think, October 30th. And you can vote in any polling place in your county that you're registered. So it's not like voting on election day where you have to go to your precinct. The early voting, you can vote anywhere in your county as long as you're registered in that county. So
great.
Awesome. That's good to know. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it, guys.
Take care. Stay safe.